The gods will decide your fate. What is up, everybody, and welcome to my review of a long-rumored sequel to a 2000 Best Picture winner, Gladiator, called Gladiator II. So I'm somebody who is a massive fan of the original film. It came out when I was 10. I remember distinctly that Blade and Gladiator were like the two badass movies of that era that I would just rewatch the DVD constantly. And I have heard rumors and seen interview snippets from Ridley Scott for what feels like maybe over 15 years of him talking about potential ideas for a Gladiator sequel. I think at one point it was going to be about Maximus and the afterlife. There was times when he was talking about focusing it on Lucius. There was other times where it was just going to fast forward into history. So it never really felt like an idea that had enough steam behind it to actually come to fruition. But fast forward to 2024 and son of a bitch, it's here. Now I have to be honest, this is one of those weird, odd scenarios where I should be at least somewhat interested, excited, or curious about a sequel to a film that I consider to be one of the greatest movies of all time, but this is one of those odd times where I just don't know where the hell you go in the story. I don't know what narratively you're going to do that merits this movie's existence after seeing parts of the trailer. Never watched a full one, I rarely do anymore. The production value and the battles looked pretty badass, if not a little over the top, but story-wise, they weren't really selling me on that. So all the way up to the point that I walked into the theater yesterday, I really had no idea what to expect from this. I heard some great early buzz, some people saying one of the greatest sequels of all time. That immediately makes me take every word said with a giant boulder of salt. And I figured, if nothing else, there's a chance that I'll just have some dumb fun with this one. If it's on the lower end of my expectations, hopefully at least there'll be some exciting stuff to watch. But maybe, just maybe, Ridley Scott can pull out another one of those Ridley Scott classics and actually follow up a Best Picture winner and give us a story that makes us hungry yet again to go back to Rome, to go back to the Colosseum and say, fuck yeah, we are glad to be back. Starting off with the positives, I think that this movie is an interesting compromise, which is kind of going to hint where I'm going to go later on in the review. So when it comes to sword and sandals movies, we tend to get two types of films. You get those that go more for the awards-worthy consideration like Gladiator, like Troy, and then you get movies that are more on the end of like Gods in Egypt and Immortals, and way on the end down there you see things like Meet the Spartans. This movie is kind of a compromise between those two styles. Something that certainly is going for some gravitas, something that's going for some serious production value, that's trying to, obviously play coy with history, but take things seriously, while also having some fun, blowing things up a little bit, making things a little silly and ridiculous and exciting for just the on-screen spectacle. This is a movie that I think finds an interesting balance between those two. Whether or not that's going to please most people or turn most people off, I guess we'll find out, but people that like really serious dramatic type films and people that like really stupid shut your brain off films, there's a little bit of everything for everybody in this one. As far as characters and performances, I think that Denzel Washington is the one who absolutely steals the show here. Now, to be fair, I don't quite know if his performance choices really make sense in this type of movie. He's just having an absolute blast and his mustache twirling and laughing and cackling throughout the entire film, and it's so fun to watch him. Denzel just oozes charisma. He just oozes style. So I can't think of one movie where he's not fun to watch, but this is one where he really gets to crank things up. And so despite having a lot more dramatic characters, having characters that are going for a lot more of a serious performance, he's the one that every time he's on screen, you're like, oh yeah, okay, I'm entertained. Production value, just like in the original film, is spot on. It's amazing. There's a lot more of a technological advancement in this movie than there was back in 2000. I think that sometimes that helps it, sometimes that hurts it, but they have this grand epic scale. The Colosseum looks great. The production value on all the costumes and the armor and the weapons and the ships and the vehicles and everything is pretty badass. So for a movie to have the budget the size that this one does, it's unfortunately a rarity nowadays that you see the budget on screen. You're like, okay, this makes sense why this cost a couple $100 million, unlike other movies that I reviewed like a week ago. And finally, whether or not it makes any sense whatsoever, and I do have some further thoughts on this, The action sequences were fun to watch. The battles were fun to watch. The epic scale, the way that they're trying to up themselves this time around was fun. It's dumb fun, but it's fun. When you see a bunch of gladiators fighting a bunch of giant CGI monkeys, and you got a dude riding around on like a dinosaur-sized rhino, and you got like literally like a Jaws battle royale going on inside of the Coliseum. Sometimes that dumb escapism just works. You know, it can be silly, but still puts a smile on your face just because it's fun to watch. And Ridley Scott's action sequences are fun to watch. Now, before we carry on with the rest of this review, if you're a fan of warfare like you see in a movie like Gladiator II, then check out the sponsor of today's video, War Thunder.
Are you a gamer who loves the smell of napalm in the morning? Well, War Thunder is the most comprehensive vehicle combat game available. War Thunder immerses you in intense combat with realistic graphics, detailed vehicles, and authentic sound effects as you take command of over 2,500 tanks, planes, helicopters, and ships of 10 major nations, ranging from armored cars of the 1920s to the battle tanks of today. You can match up in PvP battles with others in a community that is over 70 million people worldwide. My personal favorite way to play War Thunder is with the tank warfare because I love to see the damage that I inflict on my enemies. War Thunder's impressive vehicle damage models has every vehicle meticulously modeled down to each individual component, like engines, fuel tanks, and even the crew itself, all susceptible to being damaged and disabled in combat. You'll even have an X-ray view after you or an enemy is destroyed that shows you exactly where the shell penetrated and what was affected. And for all you history buffs out there, not only do you have over 100 years of vehicles to choose from, but you can actually customize each individual one. Fit it with camo, historical markings, and other decorations to make each killing machine suit your style. And you can breathe a big sigh of relief that War Thunder operates under its own in-house engine, which is optimized to give you a lag-free experience and high frame rate even on the lowest end hardware. Best of all, you can play War Thunder right now for free on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, and even a new mobile version that's available on both Android and iPhone. Click my link in the video description or pinned comment to sign up, and if you make a new account or haven't played in 6 months, you'll receive a massive bonus pack on PC and consoles to give you a head start. With 3 premium vehicles, 50% experience, an income booster, 2 advanced vehicles for rent, 100,000 Silver Lions, and 7 days of premium account time, plus even more. This offer is available for a limited time only, so check it out now. And thank you so much to War Thunder for sponsoring today's video.
And now moving on to the mixed. And I feel like mixed pretty much sums up my entire emotional response to this film. And the biggest thing is that it feels odd to have a movie that is absolutely a shut your brain off type experience that is a follow-up to a Best Picture winner. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to put Gladiator on a pedestal and act like there's not a little bit of silliness in that movie, act like they're not playing a little coy with historical accuracy. I mean, the entire concept of the film is not historically accurate. But there is a Rome-sized difference between playing a little coy with historical accuracy and filling the fucking Coliseum up with half an ocean. Like I said, fun, dumb fun to watch, enjoyable for sure for a certain type of demographic that I unashamedly am. But the movie's kind of at odds with itself. You know, it's kind of a battle of tones here. The movie has silly shit in here that it's asking you to not ask any questions whatsoever, just go for the ride, while at the same time asking you as the viewer to take themselves as seriously as they're taking themselves and invest yourself in the drama, invest yourself in the character's pain and the character's journey and the character arcs, all the while cheering for a giant rhinoceros to horn fuck somebody into the side of a wall. And I just find it to be a very strange choice to take the movie in that direction. Like, it gives all of the impressions of like a studio mandated sequel where Gladiator made a bunch of money and they won Oscars, but the director's not interested in a sequel because there was never supposed to be one, so he leaves the project and they put $200 million into it, they give it to some random dude, and it goes into theaters and it makes money because of the brand recognition, but the quality is a huge step down. It's kind of like that, not quite that dire, but kind of like that, only Ridley Scott did come back. This is a sequel to his own movie, and yet the approach and the tone and the style of what he's going for could not be more different. And I don't know if that's just a decline in quality from the types of films that Ridley Scott used to make to the types of films that he makes now that all look great but have significant issues with the story, or if it's just a difference of the way that movies are made nowadays and what audience they're playing to. We're in the Fast and Furious and Marvel Cinematic Universe era, and so we got to make things big and dumb and over the top because that's what people want to see. I honestly don't know. But I just don't think this is an appropriate sequel to the original, where the original is like a masterpiece for many people and it is a top 5 movie by Ridley Scott. This is like a regular old action blockbuster film that we see a dime a dozen of that we're probably not going to be talking about a week from now. And so really what I'm mixed on is that this is obviously a steep decline from the first film in my opinion, but it's also a movie that, I can't lie, I enjoyed watching on some level, and I probably would watch it again. It wasn't terrible. It wasn't a dumpster fire. It was good. It's just not amazing. And I want a Gladiator sequel to be amazing. I don't think that's an unfair expectation. Another thing that I'm mixed on is the lead character and the lead performance. You got Paul Mescal here as your lead, and I'll be honest and I'll be totally fair by saying anybody that they cast in this role was going to be fighting a losing battle because you are measured up against Russell Crowe in the original Gladiator, which is like an awesome character and performance that so many of us that grew up with that film love and hold on an absolute pedestal. So you could get the best fucking actor and the coolest actor in the world to play that role, and he's still going to have a hard time. Now, I have not seen Paul Mescal in anything else. I think that he's a good actor. I think that he does a good job here. I think he does exactly what they directed him to do, and especially in the more physicality side of the role, he does a very good job. I just think that the writing of the character holds back his potential a lot and really sets him up for failure because he just doesn't have the charisma, he doesn't have the gravitas, he doesn't even really have the backstory or the character arc that we can invest ourselves in to the level that we did with Maximus, because it's essentially a wash, rinse, and repeat. His wife dies in like the first 10 minutes of the film, and so now he's got a chip on his shoulder. But it's not done anywhere near as effectively as in the first film. We get one scene with him and his wife, so we don't really get to invest ourselves in the relationship, and then she's just killed with a straight arrow. You go to the original film, we got no scenes with Maximus and his wife, but the level of brutality involved with the murder of his wife and child, and us just seeing the aftermath and watching Russell Crowe's response when he finds them, is all we need to fully invest ourselves in his revenge plot. We just don't get that here. So it's a mix of just not having somebody on the level of Russell Crowe, which is an extremely tall order and not fair to Paul Mescal to accept that, or to expect that, but also the character not being written as well. So he's a suitable lead. He's fine. There's scenes where he does better than others, typically the action sequences, but he's no Maximus. I was also very mixed on the 2 twin emperor characters in here. They're twin brothers who are absolute cartoon characters, one of which played by Joseph Quinn. On one side, they are entertaining to watch. They are so maniacal and weird and cartoonish that, similar to Denzel Washington's performance, where there's a fun element there that you can't deny, but they just don't feel as serious as somebody like Commodus did in the first film. They don't feel as serious of a character as even Mescal's character is in here. They're kind of tonally in a different movie. Now, historically, those 2 people did actually exist. I'm glad that I learned that before I said this is stupid, why do we do this? Because they're trying to, again, play a little bit close to history while also playing coy with it. These people were real. These 2 brothers were real. How accurate they are to how goofy they are on screen, I can't tell you, but it was just an element where there was fun to be had, and at the same time, they were kind of sucking any of the seriousness out of the room. I even read something where Joseph Quinn said he very much kind of was inspired by Beavis and Butthead with the way that they took these characters. That tracks 100%. And the last thing that I'm mixed on is all of the callbacks. Now, we don't get like an obnoxious amount of them like we do a lot of legacy sequels nowadays, but there's quite a few of them. Now, the difference here is I do think that they take a good amount of effort into making all of these callbacks, all these callback lines, all these little flashback snippets, and really organically weaving them into the story arcs of the main characters here and making it relevant to bring those things back up and to give you a visual callback. But it also constantly reminds you of a better film. So that's where the mix lies in. Like, it feels functional within the movie, but it also kind of works against the movie at the same time. And now moving on to the negatives. And one of the main frustrations that I had with this film, they're all pretty much based in story, by the way. So if we just want to categorize my entire negative column as story problems, that's fine. But one of the first ones is that they set up a very interesting dynamic between Paul Mescal's character and Pedro Pascal's character. They're essentially put on a warpath with each other, but there's a very significant misunderstanding at play that causes a lot of drama and causes a lot of, like, you as a viewer kind of questioning whether or not you're actually rooting for this revenge plot. And you don't really know which character, if any of them, that you want to see get slain when they eventually do come to blows. And they don't spend near enough time on the movie focusing on that. To me, that was the most interesting thing that they had going on as far as a character dynamic and as far as a subplot. And it's just kind of introduced and then paid off an hour or so later on. And I would have loved to have seen a lot more focus on those two characters talking about what's going on, referencing each other, like giving a little bit more depth to both sides of that eventual battle to make it that much more impactful, that much more powerful, that much more tragic, and it just kind of felt like we got a half measure there. Another significant issue that I have with this film is that it spends way too much runtime going back through the same plot beats of the original film. Now, they do branch off and do some things differently. The second half has a lot more originality in it than the first half, for sure. It's not a one-for-one exact copy. I would say it's 60 to 70% the same film. But that's still too much for me, especially when the first film is significantly better. So when you're watching over an hour of runtime of this movie and it just feels like we're going through the same exact beats, the same revenge path for the same exact reason, dude ends up in slavery, ends up having to fight as a gladiator while having a bone to pick with one of the fucking people watching the gladiator fights. Like, it is so reminiscent of the first film that it took a long time for me to really get invested in what was going on because it was just so monotonous. Which again just kind of leads a lot of us that were skeptical about this film to automatically go back to our initial hypothesis, which is, does this movie need to exist? Is it going to justify its existence? And I think that one element there is the biggest thing working against this movie, convincing me otherwise. And the final issue I had with the film, I'm gonna put a spoiler alert up here, but it's a very complicated spoiler alert because it felt like common knowledge to me. So this movie plays coy with the identity of the main character, Paul Mescal's character. And it's not until just over an hour into the movie before his identity is actually revealed. Which would have been interesting if it wasn't blatantly obvious who this character was from the beginning of the movie. And I can't point directly to how I knew that. I've read numerous articles that Ridley Scott has hinted at what direction he was going to go with Gladiator II for well over a decade now. I even feel like I remember them saying or hinting at this in the trailer. I checked on Wikipedia and a number of other places, and they just flat out tell you who his character is in the plot synopsis. So it was such a bizarre choice for me to have this character be utilized almost like a plot twist that the movie is hinging on, and never in the pre-production of the movie, in the post-production of the movie, in the marketing of the movie, and Ridley Scott talking about the movie, do they keep that any sort of secret. So there's probably some people that are going to walk into this that are just average moviegoers that see Gladiator II on a poster, they put their money down, they go sit down, they go for the first hour, and they go, oh wow, that's who he is. But I think the majority of us knew who he was. And so that also drags things down a lot in that first hour because you're not able to really invest or really like get into any of the actual drama with his actual identity because they spend well over a third of the movie not telling you all of that. So it's almost like the movie holds you at arm's distance for over an hour and then suddenly it's like, okay, now you can invest yourself. Just a very bizarre decision. And with that said, let me know down in the comment section, like when you walked into this movie, did you know who his character was, or was that actually a surprise for you? Because I am curious on that. That's why I haven't said his name. That's why I put a spoiler alert. I don't want to pretend everybody else invests themselves in movie news and Ridley Scott interviews as much as I do, but That was just bizarre to me. I was like, no shit, that's who he is. You actually tried to play coy with that? Why? And to take it a step further, I don't even know if it really suits the movie well as some sort of a plot reveal. I think it actually would have made the movie more interesting to just reveal that from the beginning. Just go from the end of Gladiator to the beginning of Gladiator II with the flashback scene that they eventually show you, and just go from there and let us invest even more in that character, because now we know we have this pre-established relationship to them. So that was just so bizarre to me. I really can't fathom what the benefit of that choice was at all. And the last thing that I'll say before we get out of here is that I've really felt the decline in the score of the movie. Now, Hans Zimmer scored the first film. It's an amazing score. He decided not to come back for the second film, and I feel his absence is very much palpable in the movie. I feel like the score is not nearly as booming, not nearly as epic, and for as much as this movie is obviously focusing on the action sequences and the battle sequences being the pièce de résistance of the experience, I think having a score on the level of the first film could have really elevated things quite a bit. As is, it's a fine score, and as somebody that doesn't really get that passionate about scores, that means that it kind of just bleeds into the background and you don't even really notice that it's there. So it's fine, but nowhere near as good as the original film. Running theme here. So overall, guys, don't walk into this expecting this to be anywhere near the level of the original film. I think that most people would have enough sense to do that anyway, but if you like your sword and sandals movies to take themselves seriously but also have a little bit of fun, I think this movie is going to be exactly what you are wanting. This is going to be your cup of tea. But I could see a lot of people that just love the original, that are expecting something to at least be within the tone of that movie, within the approach of that film, that are going to be very puzzled and a bit turned off by how silly they go with things here. Overall, I enjoyed it enough. I will rewatch it eventually, but it's not an instant classic like the original. Nowhere close. Well, that's it for this one, guys. Be sure to check out War Thunder for free on PC, PlayStation, and Xbox, or Android or iPhone. And if you check out the link in the video description or the pinned comment, you could score that awesome bonus pack. Please like, share, hit that subscribe button, check out my 2024 new release reviews, or even my top 100 films that I think has Gladiator on there. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.